on today's Story Beat.
I was with Cannonball Adderly. He died, and I was a pallbearer at his funeral. And Jesse Jackson did the eulogy, and he said, Cannonball combines science and soul. That's how I play. The science serves the soul for me. Some people, hey, everybody has their own way. They're into all the, different technical things or whatever, or different time signatures, which I like to do. But to me, I want everything to be soulful.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on Story Beat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, the brilliant jazz musician Michael Wolff, is an award-winning, internationally acclaimed pianist, composer, bandleader, and now author. In a long-running musical career, he's been the musical director for the great Grammy-winning jazz singer Nancy Wilson and the award-winning The Arsenio Hall Show. He's also been a member of Impure Thoughts, Wolff Clark Expedition, and a co-star with his sons, Nat and Alex, on the TV series The Naked Brothers Band. Michael's life story is detailed in his memoir, On That Note, released in 2022. I've read On That Note and can tell you, Michael writes powerfully and movingly about his time in the jazz world and the many challenging experiences he's had while winding his way towards success in both music and life. Michael made his recording debut with Cal Tjader in the mid-1970s and has since gone on to play and record with some of the greatest jazz musicians in the world, including legends like Flora Purim and her husband, Airto Moreira, Cannonball Adderly, Sonny Rollins, and the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra, among many others. He's performed with and conducted over 25 symphony orchestras, including those in Dallas, Fort Worth, Berlin, Atlanta, Memphis, and Pittsburgh. Michael's performed at Carnegie Hall, the Royal Albert Hall, Birdland, Bach Dancing and Dynamite Society, Snug Harbor, and Mesro, among hundreds of others in the U.S. and around the world. He's released 21 recordings to critical and popular acclaim. Aside from performing with drummer Mike Clark in Wolff Clark Expedition, he's also part of a trio featuring Ben Allison on bass and Alan Mednard on drums. Michael also records and performs in conjunction with jazz radio station WBGO at the Yamaha Piano Salon in New York City. Michael's a recipient of the BMI Music Award, the winner of the Gold Disc Award in Japan, and the recipient of the Hamptons International Film Festival's Award for Best Film Score for the film The Tick Code, starring his wife, Polly Draper, Carol Kane, Tony Shalhoub, Gregory Hines, and Cameron Manheim. Michael has also composed the scores to other film and TV projects, including The Naked Brothers Band. He also wrote the score for Polly Draper's 2018 film, Stella's Last Weekend. Please be sure to stick around at the end of the show because we have a real treat. Michael is graciously sharing with us a sample of his work, a piece of music he recorded with his son Alex Wolff called Left Out with Drums. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm deeply honored to welcome one of the very best jazz pianists to ever sit before a keyboard, Michael Wolff. Michael, thanks so much for joining me on StoryBeat today.
Steve, thanks for having me. Now that I heard that bio, I'm starting to feel good about myself. I like that.
It's about time. It's really about time. So let's go back a little bit in time, toward the very beginning of your life as a musician. Did you feel like music was a calling? Did it call out to you and say, music is something that I need to do with my life, even as a young boy?
Yes, I think music was something that I loved doing from the time I was about 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
My father was an amateur musician and he played piano, but he mainly played clarinet and recorder, and he could just pick up anything and play it. So when I was a little kid, he would show me little things on the piano, like the St. Louis Blues and different things. I really went for it. Of course, as a little kid, I was also really wanting to be a baseball player, do all the stuff the kids do. And it was really when I when I was going into the 10th grade, I was 15 years old. And I met a guy named Dick Whittington. My family was from the South, but we had moved to Berkeley, California in '61. Right. And he was a jazz pianist, and I took lessons from him. And I just thought, this is it for me. This is what I'm going to do.
Now, your father was a jazz aficionado, yes?
Yeah, he was a jazz aficionado. He would sit me down listening when I was a little kid. I mean, my earliest memories are sitting on his lap, and he had a rocking chair, and he'd be smoking a cigar or a pipe or something, and holding he was a golfer, his 9-iron. He was a doctor, but he loved all this stuff. And we would listen to Count Basie and Ray Charles and Oscar Peterson and George Shearing and all these great musicians. He would tell me as we were listening, what was going on, in the music from his point of view. And it was a great education.
This is even as a little boy, 4 years old.
Little boy. He would dance around the house. He and my aunt, his sister, Nita, they could tap dance. They just learned it, saw a shoe. They were from Indianola, Mississippi, a little town of Mississippi.
So music was in your blood from early on.
It was.
And so it was almost a natural transition.
No.
It wasn't something that you had to force yourself to do. It was something right there in front of you.
Oh, no. It was a lifesaver for me. I at that time, in that summer that I turned 15, I was going into 10th grade. I had a real bad experience with some drugs. Because this was in the 60s, in Berkeley, California, and we were trying everything. And I really had a bad experience. And I got very kind of agoraphobic. I couldn't leave the house and full of anxiety. And music saved me. I know I could go to the piano every day and it would be exactly how it always was. And that's when I focused all of my energies on playing the piano.
It's interesting you used the term that music saved you.
Yeah.
I don't think of music. I think of music as saving lots of people, but not as saving an individual by playing. I didn't think of it that way.
It did. I had Tourette's syndrome. I still do, which is a lot of energy, a lot of ticks and noises, and it's a big fight all the time. And I didn't know I had Tourette's syndrome. I didn't know there was a name for it till I was in my 30s. But when I was a kid, I just knew that when I played the piano, everything in me relaxed in my body, and my soul. And so,
do you have a thought as to why that works that way? Is it because all of your energy is being focused in one thing?
Well, I was good friends with the great neurologist Oliver Sacks. He's a great writer and great.
Sure.
And I met him because I ended up being the chairman of the board of the Tourette's Syndrome Association. I got heavily involved. And Oliver said, he said to me, I told him, I said, when I play the piano, Oliver, I feel like the tics aren't an issue. But when I get up in my band to talk, they come back. And he says, well, look, man, it's all about energy. It's about the energy going through your body. And when you're playing the piano, your energy is focused on that activity.
Interesting.
If someone's an actor or an athlete, they're an athlete. If you do anything like that, you can be very focused and not have the issue. He said, I tell my patients, just let it fly, man. Because I was always, I lived in shame. I didn't even know what I had. I just was so embarrassed that I did these weird movements. And, people thought I was, I don't know what they thought, stupid or on drugs or whatever. So it was, finding music was really a salve to me, really saved. It did.
You write in your book that you have Tourettic energy. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Tons of energy. It's just like a lot of impulse. That's why for me, playing sports was great. I got to stay after school every day till they send us home in the dark,
Right.
Just running around. I always had a lot of energy. And then I come home and eat some cereal and practice the piano and eat dinner, practice the piano and go to bed. I never did homework, I knew this is what I needed to do. But because when I touched the piano, something went through me and I could just feel some kind of, I don't know what you would call it, energy or power. I'm not really a religious person, but if I were, I would say it's God or it's nature. Something was going on. It wasn't like I was doing it all the time. I was practicing. But when the music was happening, I was observing it go through me and I'm going, oh man, I never would have thought to do that.
A huge amount of what you do is, well, and we're going to talk about this later, but creating as you're playing. You're
definitely
improvising. It's a huge part of
right.
jazz.
Right.
And so you're having to focus not only the playing ability, but you're concentrating on what you're playing.
Well,
not just reading sheet music.
it's really better for me when I'm playing not to think about it too much. If it's really happening, I'll tell you what I'm trying to do now at this late date. I'm trying to play in public the way I play at home, like when I'm on the phone. And I just go, yeah, check this out. Check this out. And I just whip it off and I don't care what it sounds like. And I'm getting lately, my gigs are just like that. It's like, oh, here we go. Take it or leave it, I'm just going to enjoy it. I like it. It's tactile. I love the feeling of my hands on the piano. I love the sound that comes out. It's really sensual in a way. And yet, like I was saying, impulsive. I just play what I feel like playing.
And fortunately for you, you play jazz where you can do that more frequently than, say, a symphony player could play.
Yeah, it's true.
So when I listen to you play, because I've listened to a bunch of your work, I can both hear and in videos of you, I can see that you love what you're doing. It's obvious. It's not, you're not faking it.
Yeah.
You clearly love what you're doing. How much does actual passion for music factor into how you perform it?
It's everything. I'm so lucky. I have a wife and 2 children. My sons are 27 and 28 and 25. Nat and Alex Wolff, and they, they have intense passions. My wife's an actress and a writer and a director. And my boys are great musicians, and they're very successful movie actors. And it's like I didn't grow up with anybody like that. My dad was a doctor. My mom became a social worker, and they were passionate about their thing. But being passionate about the arts, it's just something that it eludes you all the time. So I think every time I go to play, I can't wait to do it, but I'm always wondering how it's going to turn out. And, I'm thinking about if I can, I don't know what's going to happen.
You said it eludes you.
Oh yeah. I never feel like I got it. I feel like, I'm teaching at NYU now, New York University, and I have to teach all these kids. But really, I'm checking them out, see what they're into, because what I'm really good at is having a great feeling and excitement and being open to what's happening. And I'm much better when I perform live than I'm just sitting around. But it just eludes me. I don't know. I just don't. It's just kind of like magic in a way.
And so when you then go to play, it just all comes alive.
Hopefully. Sometimes better than others. But what I like is when I can just say, okay, I've done all the practicing I can do. I've studied, I've listened, I've had all these experiences. It's just like writing my book, it's like, I'm just me. So I'm going to sit down and be me, and hopefully it'll come out. And mostly it does now. I've done it so much, but it was a long process.
Well, now you started playing professionally at a fairly young age. You were what, 2021 when you started to play?
Yeah, I went on the road with Cal Tjader, this jazz vibist, right after my birthday when I turned 20.
That's incredibly young to be at that level.
Oh yeah, man. I wasn't old enough to go into the bars we were playing, so during the breaks, I had to sit by myself in a chair, in California, 20 feet away from the bar or whatever.
Was there a moment prior to that when you realized you were truly good at playing? Did you have an epiphany at some point?
Oh, when I was a kid, read in the book, I went to summer camp quite young, maybe 10 or 11. 12, something like that. And they had a talent show. And at the talent show, I just sat down at the piano one time and just played. I didn't even know what I was going to play. I just remember it was in the key of G, and I just played bluesy. And people loved it. And I just went, wow, what's that about? It gave me an inkling that there's something about this music thing in me. I took classical lessons till I was about 14. And I wasn't that good at that. And I didn't care that much about it. But I did my lesson for the teacher. But, all my thoughts were on, I just want to make up my own music. I don't want to spend all my time reading this music by these guys. Of course, I have a different view now that I'm educated, but then I was just like, I just wanted to make up my own music. So I had a teacher when I was in the 7th grade, I guess about 12, named Florence Bardell. She was a real old lady. And she said to me, all right, I'm going to make you a deal. You're going to play one of your compositions every week. You're going to play a Beatles tune every week. And then you're going to do the classical music I want you to do. I said, okay. And I was happy then. So, but I didn't know if I was good. No, I didn't know. It was really when I started playing in high school, 10th grade, 11th grade. And then we started going, Berkeley High School, Berkeley, California, going to some jazz festivals. I hear the other people. People were hearing me, playing in public. I was getting a response, I was kind of a prodigy at that. I could just do it. It took
And
me a
you
long time to figure it out later what I was doing.
and you were madly in love with doing it, so that was helpful.
It wasn't even love. It was need. It was desperate need. I desperately needed it. Yeah, I loved it. And it was my whole social life were my musician friends. Because I was weirdly, I'm not anymore, but I was really shy when I was a kid and, embarrassed about my tics and everything. And so, the music was a gateway for me, especially to meet girls, some would like the piano playing or sit next to me on the bench or when I was about 14, 15, I realized this is my way to meet girls, and this is my way to talk, and this is my way to, then I don't have to really, I could never hit on a girl or something like that. It wasn't me.
That's the classic way to meet girls is be a musician. Yes.
That's what John Lennon said. I remember once I saw him on the Tomorrow Show with Tom Snyder. He says, well, John, why'd you get into music? He goes, for the birds, Tom, for the birds, It's just in my social life, my friends that I'm still close with some of my friends from the 10th grade. We had a band, the Berkeley Jazz Quintet. A friend of mine, Nick Timbrook, was a trombone player, was still tight. He became a big producer and arranger and composer. And, it's like all we cared about, being a musician, if you're really into it, whether it's jazz or not, you're just a nerd. You're just like, when's the next Miles album? What's this? What's this scale? It really is. I used to say, I used to observe for me that it was a combination of trying to be cool and do hip stuff and then being very scholastic because you have to really, I have to study it, to figure it out. I really, had no clue.
So when you listen to music, what for you makes a good piece of music good? Why is it good for you?
That's a good question. I have to say, I kind of sometimes listen sort of functionally, if I'm listening like to the last few days, I've been listening to the very fastest players because I'm playing some music with a great singer, Camille Thurman. Some of her music is really fast. So I'm listening to Herbie Hancock or whoever's playing really fast and just seeing if I can soak that feeling up, So I think it's about feeling, it's about feeling. It could be, I like a lot of different kinds of music. I like rock and funk and jazz and, country. I even like country and classical. I don't know. It's not intellectual for me.
It has to hit you in the gut.
Yeah. I have a thing in my solar plexus where when I'm playing, I feel the rhythm, the inner rhythm of the song. If it's quarter notes, if it's swinging, I feel triplets, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If it's Latin, it's 1 and 2 and 1. And if it's funk, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 16ths. It's kind of technical, but I feel it in my solar plexus, and that's where I feel the music.
Do you have a regular routine in working on your playing? Do you go through a daily routine of some kind?
No, I don't. I've had routines over the years. What I do now is I still study now and then with a teacher here in New York, and it's just classical teacher, and it's just to work on technique. And when I was about 40, which is 30 years ago, I had some issues with my hands, as most pianists do at a certain age, repetitive stress,
Sure.
So I went and studied this technique called the Taubman, Taubman, Dorothy Taubman technique, and saved my technical life, my hands. So I still work on that. And usually every day I will, it's not so much what you play, but it's what you think about and how it feels when you play. So I'll do some stuff where I'm playing and I'm thinking about this technique, and now that I'm teaching a lot, I will teach it a little bit. I'm not an expert at it, but if I have somebody that's having problems with their hands. And I've gone through periods where I work really hard on my ear training. I'm kind of like a serial composer. I just keep writing all the time. I keep big, huge music paper. I write actually on music paper. I have a studio and I have Logic and all the computer, and I do a lot of tracks for people if they need keyboard tracks, whatever. So I'll go in and do that. I just did one for a guy in Brazil, really beautiful Brazilian piece, and I did piano and Rhodes. It just depends. But I can't say that I have. I'll tell you what happened. We'll talk about it later, but I got really sick. I came up with, I could barely get to the piano. I was bedridden for about 8 months. And I came up with a whole new way to practice scales, which was 2 scales at a time, one in one end, one at the other, and just playing with each other, one going up, one going down, maybe against each other, mirroring, just do all kind of stuff. So it's Fred Hirsch is a good friend of mine, jazz pianist, and he said to me years ago, he says, I just look at practicing as experimenting. And that really helped me. So
Practice is experimenting.
Yeah. I mean, some of it is like going to the gym, just to keep my hands, but it's more conceptual really than anything else. It's not about how strong your fingers are. I mean, come on, that's not what makes you a great player. It's about the concept of what you're going to do. And I'll go through periods where I'm sight reading music every day to keep my sight reading up. I'm not doing that so much now.
There's clearly some connection that happens between the mind and the hands to make it happen, because you're not thinking every single press of the key. You're just doing it, as you said before.
Well, when I had my problems with my hands when I was 40, I went to this guy, can't remember his name, this doctor, really great neurologist in San Francisco. And in his office, he had a keyboard, and he dealt with a lot of the people in the San Francisco Symphony, particularly violinists, with lots of issues with repetitive stress. And he watched me play. So he said, oh, yeah, this is what you got to do. He said, you got to remember, the hand teaches the brain. It's not the brain necessarily teaching the hand.
Interesting.
So when I was about to going to have kids, and he said, okay, have your kids go outside. Don't just have them sit home on the computer. You got to have them things outside teach the brain. It was great advice. And I think that he said playing the piano is the height of mammalian neurological development.
Wow.
Sight reading, hearing, playing, that's what he said.
Well, see, I think that's probably right. It's every bit of your being has to be in it.
But I'm really a combination. When I was with Cannonball Adderly, he died, and I was a pallbearer at his funeral. And Jesse Jackson did the eulogy, and he said, Cannonball combines science and soul. That's how I play. The science serves the soul for me. Some people, hey, everybody has their own way. They're into all the, different technical things or whatever, or different time signatures, which I like to do. But to me, I want everything to be soulful in some way.
Is the science technique and academic thought, or what do you mean by science?
Well, yeah, just knowing all the harmony and knowing the modes and just knowing everything that you could teach. But, what's hard to teach, and I try to do this with my students, is that what's underneath the music. My father was a psychiatrist later in life. When I was young, he was an internist. And he said, listen to a big band, Count Basie's big band is like listening to a patient. Everybody listens to the trumpets and the saxes because they're the loudest and they're playing the melodies. But if you really want to know what's happening in a band, you got to listen to the bass and the drums. That's the feeling. And for him, when he talked to a patient, they'd say a bunch of stuff, but it was what's underneath it, So for me, what I think I was good at when I was young was that feeling part. And if I heard a song, I couldn't necessarily figure out every note, but I could glom on, like by osmosis. I could glom onto the feeling of it. It has its pros and cons, because sometimes I'm not exact enough, when I do it like that.
Well, you talk about the most important, or someone, I can't remember who, said to you that the most important part of the music is between the beats.
Yeah, I think between the lines, it was how we put it.
Between the lines. Who was it that said that to you?
Oh, an old girlfriend of mine said it to me. Because she wasn't a jazz musician. Most people aren't jazz fans, including my wife. I mean, she liked me. She come to the gig, but that's not her thing. But this girl said to me, I listen to your music. You play between the lines. And she was right. It's not, everything's not on it. It's like you're kind of dancing and around, in and out, under the time. I like to go fast and slow and speed up and slow down. And, it's all this stuff going on.
You also write that you should play only what's necessary.
Well, I'm definitely guilty of not doing that. I get playing. I like to play a lot of notes. It just means, when you're a pianist, particularly, you do what's called comping or accompanying or complementing the other instruments, say a sax or a singer like Nancy Wilson, or I play with Sonny Rollins, whoever it is. So I'm playing back there and the drums and the bass are going ding, ding, ding. They're playing time. And my job is to play the harmony, listen to what that person is playing. And it made me, it took me years to figure out, my job is to make them sound good, even better. My job is not for me to get to try to play all my stuff, which is what I used to do, But then you go, well, how do I know what to play? It's nothing. No parts are written out. for the piano. You just get a chord symbol, play a C7, play this, So when I was with Cannonball, I was 22, and we were playing at Just Jazz. It was a club in South Philly, Philadelphia, not far from you. And we were playing. It was upstairs. It was a hard gig because I had my Fender Rhodes, and nobody would help me bring it up the steps. I had to do it myself. Oh, one night we're playing, and all of a sudden I had a gestalt, and I saw on the ceiling a big circle, like a pie, like a pizza pie or something. And I saw where the drums were playing and the bass was playing and maybe a trumpet solo. And I saw that the only place for me to play is when there's a space. Otherwise, don't play where there's already somebody playing, where somebody's got their piece of the pie there. Only play where it's empty. And that started me figuring out, my job is to, either create a little rhythmic thing or answer, or, it's like a conversation, really.
That's your pie theory, right?
My pie theory of improvisation.
Yeah, I read that in the book. I thought that was really interesting. The pie theory of improvisation. I'm also curious, when you played with Cal Tjader, he would tell you to breathe. What did he mean by telling you to breathe? How important is that?
You mean don't play so much? It was great advice. I can't say that when I was 20, I was willing to follow it because I thought he was an old man, was he telling me? But I realized I knew it was great, but I was kind of like, oh God, I want to play real intensely and play a whole bunch of notes because I was trying to learn all of this stuff, And I didn't go to a music school to learn jazz. I mean, there was only one school when I was a kid. That was Berkeley in Boston. I didn't go there. So I went to UCLA and UC Berkeley and studied classical music, So I learned to play on the bandstand, even though I practiced and everything, I took some piano, jazz piano, but I really learned in front of people, playing with professionals that were better than I was. Well, so I was trying to play a lot.
You learned in what they call the school of hard knocks. You just did it.
Well, what it was kind of like? It was like, the old days, like some kid wanted to be a cobbler. The family would give him, when he was 9 or 10 years old, to a cobbler, and he would be the apprentice, right?
Sure.
That was the system. It was the apprentice system. So I went on the road with Cal, and then, Airto and Cannonball, all these people. And I gleaned things from every one of them. Either they told me or I just got it, from doing it. But they also said pithy things, everybody was very cool, but most people didn't talk that much about the music, but just from being in those situations, I was able to grow. So it's a different kind of education than what I'm teaching at NYU, and where most musicians now, almost all jazz musicians, go to college. When I was that age, you go, who have you played with? I played with Cannonball. I played with this one. Now they go, where'd you go to school? Recently, a guy asked me my age, but he'd studied with Lenny Tristano for a long time. He's really amazing pianist. He said, well, who did you study with? Barry Harris or somebody? I go, I never studied with anybody famous, man. I never thought you could do that. I thought, well, you're on your own with this music. You got to just go to that piano or listen to a record or go to somebody's gig and ask, you got to do it yourself. So maybe it was a harder way to go. But
well, I have a suspicion that, like many things in the arts, the artists start out sort of finding their own way, and then it becomes something that people teach in a university setting or in some other school. And you were in it prior to it being a big school thing.
Absolutely. There was a little bit, but not much. Now we're just turning out overqualified jazz musicians for no gigs. I don't know what they're going to do. They're probably going to go teach, or studying jazz in a college is good. You learn a lot for life and whatever, you're going to be a teacher, but not a lot of jobs like there were.
No, and it's true for most music. There's almost no outlet for it in albums or sales in any way, unless you actually tour. That's the only way to make any money.
Tour. Yeah. But jazz, hardly any place you can tour to.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it. Like, I'm getting ready to go to LA, play at Vitello's, and I'm going to go to the Jazz Kitchen in Indianapolis. There's some places, and I like to do it. I love to record. I love to compose, but I really love to play live.
We've already talked about this a little bit. Creating music requires really deep mental and physical skills and concentration. It's not something that you can do lightly. You actually have to spend your time working at that. Is it mainly about, when you're creating an emotion, or is there something else that's in your thought process, or how do you then tap into your emotional core to get what you're trying to get to?
You mean to be a composer when I compose?
To be a composer and to improvise when you're working live.
Well, when I compose, I use a lot of different things. You know, a lot of times it will be a feeling. Like I remember I had a gig at the Village Vanguard quite a while ago with this great saxophonist, Steve Wilson. And I just knew the sound of his saxophone. And I just got a feeling, and I sat at the piano and I wrote this beautiful tune, I have to say, for him. So I was inspired by the feeling I got that I was going to play with him and what it was going to do. But sometimes I just write a bunch of stuff down, ideas, and then I go back to them. I go, this could be a good thing. And I kind of manipulate it to turn it into a song because I want to write something that's a vehicle for me to play as a composer. Now, if I'm doing a film score, the inspiration comes from the film and the director. You know, you sit down with the director, you watch the film, you get an idea of the characters, you get an idea where the film's going. And then the director, you do what's called spotting the film. You actually sit there and it's got numbers under it, you know, symphony numbers, and you write down, we want the music to start here. I want it to build here. I want it to move it along. This is sad. This, you know, it's all, it's like you're making shoes in a way.
It's a little bit of a technical skill to it.
Yeah, I love it though, because you're inspired by other things. But so I see, how can I put some magic into it? But I gotta do my job, just like just like accompanying a singer. That's the film is the singer, and I'm the pianist. You know,
it's creative, but you're in a little bit of a box.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I like having a form. It's like playing the blues. You're in a 12-bar form, but it's what are you going to do within the form? How are you going to be interesting? You know.
Sure.
So it's like box. When I improvise, I'll tell you, I don't know what I'm doing. I really don't. Sometimes I just go, what am I doing? I don't know. I know all this stuff. I'm not a bebop player. I didn't really practice all that stuff. I work on harmony all the time. I work in this Oliver Messiaen stuff and, you know, sounds that I want to hear. When I improvise, I'm just trying to create melodies, I guess. I'm trying to create music on the spot. And, you know, I was usually successful, but I'm not like a Broadway show about jazz where it's the same script every night. Some musicians are. They've practiced everything and they play their stuff. They do it differently. I'm not like that. I'm really, and you know, it can be to detriment, but it's just the way I do it.
It sounds like you have to be fearless too, because you're doing something new live every time you play.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it as fearless. Maybe it is. I mean, there was a great bass player we played together with Nancy Wilson. We played together on the Arsenio Hall Show, John B. Williams. And, you know, he's somebody I really looked up to, kind of a mentor, older than I. And somebody asked him once, well, how do you play with Mike? And he said, well, I know all the options. So he can do whatever he wants, and I know all the options. That's kind of how it goes.
What would you say are the biggest challenges you face when you're playing live?
That I face?
Yes. What are the big challenges that you come in contact with? What do you have to overcome when you're playing?
I think getting the audience to show up, that's the hardest thing, you know. Getting paid. Musically, I just played at Birdland Theater here, which is downstairs from upstairs Birdland, obviously. And Thursday, and it was amazing, but I played there a lot and I know the sound, I know the piano, you know, my group. So there was no issues. One could go to a club or do a concert, deal with the piano, deal with the sound, you know, just those things can be a big problem. If you can't hear everybody, my whole music is interactive, you know, the bass player and drummer, if I've got a horn player, we have to hear each other because we're bouncing off each other, just like you and I are having a conversation. If I couldn't hear you, I wouldn't know what to say, you know? So I try to train myself to be a vessel for all of that inspiration that's going to come through me, you know?
You have to be a very good listener, don't you?
Yeah, I have developed into that. But if I'm the leader, they got to listen to me probably more than I have to listen to them. But I do, because why not? I get the best ideas and have the most fun, you know?
But you also write in the book that you, as the pianist, frequently follow the bass.
Well, what I was talking about was when I was young, I didn't know a lot of those standard songs, and the bass player always knew them. So I follow them. But I do. I mean, I'm interactive. I kind of respond rhythmically to the drummer, but harmonically with the bass player. Yeah.
I see. So you're looking for the bass to set up what you're going to harmonize with.
If we have like we were talking about form and sort of being in a box or whatever, usually you'll have like some chords figured out or something figured out, right? So then for me as a player, I like to play away from those things. You know, I know those things. I'm on a different, like there's different planes of the music. The music, here's the rhythm, here's the chords. that I could play in there, which is great. But then sometimes I like to just leave it. I know where it is. It's going around in a circle. But I go over here. And the drummer the drummer and the bass player can either go with me, or we just all go to some crazy place, or they can stay there and I can create a lot of tension and then resolve it. So I can't help that. That's just something I do. I have, if my friend Nick says, hey, I'm going to give you some music to do a track on. Try as hard as you can to play it regular. He says, you won't be able to. And I can't. But, it gets more what he wants. Yeah.
Well, so does it ever become disharmonic or not in harmony?
Definitely. I'm creating tension. So I go away from the harmony. But I'm aware of it. And I'm aware of the amount of tension that I'm creating. So tension, resolution. I'm aware of that. It's happening.
So you're actually working your way toward the resolution somehow.
Oh, yeah, from it and back to it. It's like a rubber band. Yeah. You stretch it out. You feel the end of it. You don't want it to break, and then you bring it back.
You write in the book again that in terms of improvisation, or essentially composing, you write that composing is slow improvising and improvising is fast composing.
That's it.
And it sounds obvious, but can you elaborate on that a little?
Well, when I compose, I might improvise a little idea, right? But then I got to stop and write it down and record it. Something's on my phone. I voice memo, I'll record it, whatever. It's a slow process because I'm trying to make things more perfect, So if I write on paper, which like I was saying, I write on big music paper, and I'll write my ideas, and then I'll just sit and maybe I'll sing an idea, and I'll play that, or I'll play a chord. I do it various ways. And then when I've kind of got something, I might have a couple different ideas, and then I just look at it. I can think about it. I can play it over and over and over and over, and make little changes, or the changes will just happen. I'm kind of slow as a composer. I'm not a super fast. I can write a fast piece, but I don't like to do it. I like to, spend a week on a piece or something if I can. When you're doing a movie score, you just write, boom, 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 boom. You're in a hurry. But for my own stuff, sometimes it'll be fast. But I always find I can make it better.
So here's where it's I'm trying to get into the mindset of it. I understand once you have a movie, if you've composed something for a movie or a TV show, it gets locked in and it's baked in forever. That's it. It doesn't change. But when you write a jazz piece and you then take it out on the road, you're going to change it all the time. So
yes.
When you write it down, you're only writing it down as the basis of it, as the concept.
Well, no, all songs are different, but if I'm writing down something that I feel is a vehicle for me to play jazz on, in other words, it's like I have a track in a gym and I really want to run on this track. I just try to make a good track to run on, and I really like the track, So it just depends. But sometimes I'll write a ballad, a very rich piece, and there's not a lot of improvisation on it. Usually that there's some, but I really don't want to change it. It's all different.
Even when you're playing it live.
Yeah, playing it live. But most things playing it live, when I play with my trio now, Ben Allison, Alan Mednard, or sometimes I use Daryl Green on the drums. We played the other night. There's music to everything in terms of the structure. Everybody knows Zach, but we all know that I'm going to do whatever I want to do, and they're going to go with me. And it's a blast, It's like basketball. If you look at the triangle offense, like the Lakers have, or
exactly
the Warriors, they don't. They might have a few plays. They just have a concept. They don't know where the ball is going to go, they don't know where the person's going to block them, but they got to stay within the bounds or they're out of bounds. They can't go into the paint because then there's 3 seconds, right? That's how our music
exactly.
Is. So within that, we can make up plays.
So let's see if there's a parallel to what I do as a screenwriter, because screenwriting, I've taught forever, is a form that every single movie that's ever been made that's of any value, in my perspective,
3 acts, top points, all that.
It has a form. There's a form to it. It's going to be a certain length and so on. There's a form, but yet within that form, you can go into infinite directions.
Absolutely. You can have a horror film. You can have a love story. You can have whatever. Yeah.
And same thing with playing jazz then.
You you can break the form if you want, but generally what we do is just like with film score or film screen plays, you can break the form a little bit, but you basically have 3 acts, right? I mean, yeah, I
So
think it is a lot like that.
what does it mean to let the audience know who you are as a person? You write that in the book, that you've got to let the audience know who you are as a person.
Well, that's what I learned from Cannonball Adderly, the great saxophonist. He would talk to the audience, and he would talk about whatever was on his mind. It was 1975, so he'd talk about the Vietnam War. He said, the only way they're going to get me on the front is they're going to have to carry me up there. You know, whatever he would say. He had a lot of things he would say, you know. And Cannonball would talk to the audience. He was really funny, very warm. And I asked him about it. I said, Cannonball, that's really cool. Because most musicians don't really talk to the audience too much. They might announce it to him, but he would really talk, you know. And he said, well, I think like when they get to know you, you can take them further musically. Now, I don't know if that's true, but my personality was such as that, when I saw that, I went, I'm going to try to talk when I do gig, if it's my gig.
Well, you also were a comedian at one point.
Well, yeah,
right?
then that was later on. I did stand-up comedy for 5 years. And then that really showed me how to, again, it's very improv. I have some jokes or whatever, or things that come up, but I don't really plan anything. And I'm in the moment with the audience. Somebody says something, or, you know, or something happens in the day. I mean, I'm just talking, you know.
You're playing.
Now, what I'm doing now what I'm doing in my gigs now is I'm reading a little bit from my book and then playing a tune or two that relate to what I just read. I don't do too much about maybe 2 or 3 little things per set, but it really gives it more of a plot. But yeah, I really, it's sort of like I'm a one-man show, but I'm a jazz piano player, composer. But it's really like a one-man show. It's like, you know, it's taken me all these years to realize it's just me up there, you know? And of course the musicians, and because I don't want to be a solo pianist. That's not my thing. I like interaction. I'm not a loner.
You like you say, you like to play off of the other musicians and get the harmonies going that way.
It's just like, yeah, it's like playing basketball or anything like fun. I like to play. I like to sit at the dinner table with my family and friends and joke around. I like people and interaction. So
do you do your own arranging and orchestrations as well?
Yes.
So you don't hire an orchestrator?
No, I have some friends that are good at it. So I might say, check this out. Is anything very messed up? Is it going to work? And I'll have them, like I said, I write on papers and then they might write it out in Sibelius, even though I can do that stuff, but I'd rather go to them, you know. So,
Sibelius being a computer program.
Yeah, it's a computer program that writes music out. I use Logic Audio, which is a great program, and you can write it out from that. So, you know, I'll do that sometimes. But
how important is orchestration to what you're doing? Is it super important?
Well, with the trio, it's not, because you got piano, bass, and drums. And I mean, it's important in the sense that, hey, this piece would be fun to have mallets on the drums and the bass, you know. But I mean, not so much orchestration. But if I'm writing for the last couple of pieces I wrote for jazz piano trio, piano, bass, drums, and then string quartet, cello, viola, and 2 violins, it's all orchestration.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do it. And I've written for whole symphony orchestras and I've written for big bands, but I'm not a trained composer, just like everything else I did. When I was with Nancy Wilson, I was 26. I started touring with her, and we often played with big bands, or we played with big bands with a string section. And we were playing in New Orleans early on. There was this guy, Dick Stabile, who, you know, they had a band in the hotel at Fairmont Hotel. And he had been an arranger for Martin and Lewis, Jerry Lewis and Dean Martin, all their movies. He was a really good writer. And I was talking to him, I said, man, I want to be a writer. He goes, hey man, I heard you play the piano, just write all that stuff for the instruments. So that's what I do. Obviously I know that I have to know the ranges, I have to know what would sound good, but I just started writing. Actually, I started writing in high school. I just did it, you know.
Well, it was, as you said earlier, it's something that you were passionate about doing early on, more than learning how to play the classics. You wanted to just write.
Well, yeah, I was in a great jazz band in high school. We had a great jazz band with a lot of people who came out as famous musicians. I wrote a piece or two for that. You know, I just got inspired to do it. And so the same thing in college. We had a big band jazz thing, and I wrote a piece for that, a long suite. You know, I wasn't doing it all the time, but I like doing it. Mm-hmm. But it's a different process. You know, it's slow. But I started writing for these string quartet, and I really love it. It's really beautiful.
When you were working on Arsenio's show and you had Sammy Davis Jr. on the show, you write that he leaned over and had you start to play a song that you did not know.
I had heard him singing it at, upstairs. It was a jazz standard. I kind of knew it, but I didn't know he was going to do it. I didn't really know it. He didn't even know what key he did it in. But yeah, I just went up to say hi to him because when I was 12, my father took me to see a midnight show at the Sands in Vegas. We were going to Mississippi for something from Berkeley. And I was blown away. And I thought, this is what I want to do, some on stage thing. So I just went to talk to him. He was really sweet. And as I left, he's going, time after time, singing. And I thought, I wonder if he's going to try to play that song. And then I just kind of ignored it. And that's what happened. But again, the bass player, John B. Williams, knew the song. I said, what key? I don't know, man. Time after time, I found the key, D. Okay, boom. We just started. And I just followed John B. We just did it.
I still don't understand how you're live in front of an audience on TV and you're playing a song you've never played before and don't really know. How do you do
it's not a hard song. I mean, but it wasn't, look, music's not neurosurgery. It's just music, I've fucked up on TV a couple of times, I'll be honest with you. But,
Oh, I mean, if you're going to go out on a limb like that all the time, I would hope that you would screw up a little bit.
Exactly right.
So I want to talk for half a moment about Warren Zevon, who was your friend.
Yeah.
And
really
he wrote, in my opinion, for me personally, the greatest lyric line that's ever been written. Little old lady got mutilated late last night, to me, is the greatest line of lyrics I've ever heard. For me personally, other people disagree. That's fine.
What song was that again?
That was from Werewolves of London.
Oh,
Little old lady got mutilated late last night. So he was, and you write that he was a devoted reader, and so are you. And I'm wondering if you're being a deep reader of whatever you're reading, does that influence the music in any way?
Maybe, maybe my brain. I don't know about consciously, but I know that the years when I was really getting into music, I was a voracious reader, and I was reading, Fitzgerald, Hemingway, J.D. Salinger, Norman Mailer, just whatever I could get my hands on, that kind of cool stuff. My parents were really into that too. My mom was into literature. So, I mean, I think it just gave me a taste for art, whether I like art, I like Picasso, I like Impressionism, all that stuff, I did a whole album called Portraiture of the Blues Period. And that whole album was influenced by a Picasso show I saw in the Picasso Museum in Paris, where he took one, there was a painting by, I think, Pizarro or somebody. And he just did rooms full of paintings based on that. That's like playing the blues, man. You got the form and then you just do your thing on it. Like we were talking about, where you take a form. So, I mean, maybe unconsciously those books affected me. I know they certainly affected me when I wrote my own book. That's where they put off.
Sure. I was just curious if absorbing that information through all that reading, whether it has you thinking differently in terms of music. You're saying you don't really know.
I also, besides doing stand-up, I did 5 years as singer-songwriter. I mean, I was writing a lot of songs with lyrics. So maybe it had something to do with that. But I don't know. A lot of things happen and maybe they're not conscious. I love reading. I'm just reading a couple books now. I just love it.
Well, that's why I wondered, because I'm also a reader. So it's fascinating to me when I find out.
You know what I feel like when I read? It's like massages my brain in a different way than watching TikTok, which I do. My wife and I, during COVID, got into this thing where we weren't doing anything. So we, do our day. I'd write music and she'd write, screenplays or whatever. And then our kids were in LA. We were in New York. So we didn't see them just a little bit for like 2 years. So at night, if we started watching all those, Netflix and all that stuff, and we got totally into it. It's fun it was something we shared together. It became a real important thing in our relationship.
Sure.
It's the only thing that was happening, man.
Boy, that period was extremely rough on a whole lot of people.
Yeah, we have for friends a couple. They're both really great actors, famous, and so we live downtown. They live uptown, But we always got together. We couldn't get together anymore. So during the COVID time in New York City at 7:00 in the evening, everyone opened their windows and clapped and rang bells and hit pans as a thank you to the first responders, the doctors, and the nurses. And ambulance drivers and all those people, right?
Sure.
And at 7:05, we were on our computers, FaceTiming with our friends having dinner every night. Oh, and my wife is our cook. My friend Tony is their cook. And so we would show each other what we cooked and we'd visit for an hour or two.
I'm assuming your friend Tony is Tony Shalhoub, yes?
Tony Shalhoub and his wife, Brooke Adams. And then after a while, we started getting bored. So we started writing monologues for each other. And then we taped the monologues. We had a blast. But, you know.
So your whole family is creative, as you've already said. Your wife's very well known, Polly Draper, star of 30-something. She's also a writer and a director of many different things. And your two sons are now quite famous, Nat and Alex, as the Naked Brothers Band, and then off onto other things, The Fault in Our Stars and other movies. And I'm wondering, when you were working on the Naked Brothers Band, how did that impact your family life? Did it in any way? Was it hard to do?
Something it was the very best thing that could ever happen. Whoever gets to do that, get up every morning. You know, we made this little movie. What happened was my son Nat was maybe 7 or 8 or something, and he put a sign on his door outside the door of his room. He wrote, "I want to be a child actor, AKTOR." My wife goes, "No, man, you're not going to go out and do those auditions. It'll destroy you, you know." So she started thinking about it, and she realized when we did we had the birthday parties. We had a little camera, just a little cheap little camera, but she'd video them just to have at home movies. And the kids loved to pretend that they were famous. So she came up with this idea, the Naked Brothers Band, about a kids band that was as famous as the Beatles. So she thought, let's just make a little family movie. So we did. Non-union, below the line, you know. We raised the money and we shot it one summer and our kids were the stars, and based on my son Nat's songs at the time. So he was 9 years old and his brother Alex was 6. He was a drummer. So we did that.
It's genetic.
It's genetic. Yeah. They were really good musicians, you know. So we did that. And my wife thought, well, maybe every 10 years it would be fun. Like the 7 Ups, you know, it was a documentary where every 7 years they filmed this family. But we entered it. Kids were really liking it when we showed them. So we entered it in some film festivals. And we were at the Hamptons Film Festival, the Hamptons here in New York. And there was this guy there, Albie Hecht, who had been president of Nickelodeon. And he saw the movie and said hi. And about 3 months later, he called me and said, "I can't get this thing out of my mind. I want you guys to come up with us to Nickelodeon and let's see if we can get a show." And we said, "Well, we don't want to do a show with our kids, you know. We want to be regular kids, you know." But he said, "Well, let's go and see." So they made us an offer, and to do it, we said, "Well, we don't want to do it." And the agent said, "Well, what would make you want to do it?" We said, "Well, if we could do it in the summer in New York." So we want them to go to regular school. So that's what we did, you know. So but it ended up being about 5 or 6 months. So they'd miss, you know, they'd probably be working up until Halloween.
They miss a little bit of school.
But they eventually went to the school called Professional Children's School that was made for those kind of kids. You know?
Sure.
They're on Broadway or something. So every morning, 7 a.m, something like that, we get picked up by a van in front of the house, and a couple of the other kids and their parents would show up. We drive to Brooklyn, to Greenpoint, go to the set. We had a building, do the show, man. That's what we did for 4 or 5 months.
So you got to really work as a unit, as a real family.
We worked as a unit. Polly was the showrunner, writer, director. She wrote almost all of them and directed almost all of them. I played the father, crazy accordion player guy in the show. I also wrote the underscore. And Nat and Alex wrote all the songs. You know, they're just songwriters. So what we do is after the first season, Polly would say, "Okay, well, we finish in October. We wouldn't do anything. They go to school. We just relax. You know, I'm just doing my gigs or whatever." And then after January, she'd say, "Okay, what have you guys been writing any songs?" And she'd see the songs that because they were just writing constantly on their own. And then she'd write an episode. She'd find a song she liked, write an episode for that song. That's how we really did it. And then sometimes she'd need a song and she'd say, one day when Nat was about maybe 10 or 11, he woke up, he said, "I don't want to go to school, man." And Polly said, "Okay, you don't have to go to school if you write a song about it." So he wrote this song, "I Don't Want to Go to School," which is a big hit song. You know? I don't want to go to school. So, I mean, it was just, it was some kind of creativity, just, you know, exuding out of the house, you know, every moment. And we had a lot of fun, man. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Exhausting.
Sure,
No.
it would be exhausting, but I'm glad to hear that
No.
it was fun, because I can imagine under the wrong circumstance, it could turn into chaos within the family unit.
No, we made sure, my wife didn't hire like these professional kid actors. She just got kids, and her thing was, she got a great DP, a director of photography. And she said, look, we're not going to really, I'm going to do this show we'll block it out, but they're kids. They're going to do what they want to do. You got to follow them like it's sports. And he had done a lot of sports, and that saved it. And then at lunchtime, we'd always have an activity for them: basketball, dance, ping pong. It was the best years of their lives. They were with all their friends. 3 of the kids were in it. They'd gone to school with. So it was just a blast. We worked super hard, and they worked super hard.
And the show was a huge hit.
Huge hit for 3 years. And the great thing is that Nat and Alex, both my sons, they learned to work hard, and they learned how to treat people, because we made sure that this is a crew of 100 adults. And we'd say, okay, you're the stars, you get special treatment, but you got to be nice to every one of these people, because they're all working really hard to make you look good, So they learned to work hard. Every night we'd have dinner, and maybe some of the actors' kids lived somewhere else, but they'd be here for the summer. They'd live with us, We'd all have dinner, and during dinner, we'd learn our lines over dinner every night. And these kids, man, they could soak it up. They could learn 10 pages, in a half hour. And then it's okay. If you learned your lines, you could go watch the OC. That was the treat.
That was the treat. The treat was learn your lines.
They loved the OC. That show was big.
I have to touch on your near-death experience with cancer that you alluded to earlier. You had histiocytic carcinoma. You also had histiocytic sarcoma. Sarcoma, sorry. And you also had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma at the same time, right?
Well, I had that first, and they think either it was a misdiagnosis or it morphed into this other one. But by the time I had the other one after a year of treatment, I didn't have the lymphoma.
So explain what the histiocytic sarcoma.
They found out it wasn't even the right cancer anyway, so they got it something else. Now it's somewhere else. Well, let's put it this way. When I was diagnosed with the lymphoma, I was feeling fine. I just had some lymph nodes in my groin. I went to the doctor, my regular doctor. He goes, I don't think it's anything. We'll watch it. I don't go to that guy anymore. So after 3 or 4 months, he goes, well, maybe you should go to an oncologist. So he just sends me to an oncologist who says, no, you're healthy, man. I don't think it's anything, but let's go take some tests. PET scan, CAT scan. He goes, yeah, you got lymphoma. I had to have a biopsy, and I got it double checked. I've got a second opinion. It goes, okay, well, you're not sick now. So with this lymphoma, it is stage 4, which means it's all over your body, but it's a blood cancer. So that's kind of, when you get diagnosed, that often happens. But the cell that you have, this follicular non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, is not really that powerful. So what we do is we wait for you to get sick. When you get sick, we treat it. We can't cure it because it's so indolent. It's so slow. We actually can't kill it. It's so low grade. But what we do is we treat it, and it'll usually go away for 3 years to 5 years, and then you'll get sick and we'll treat it again, and you'll live a long life. I went, okay. And then I got sick, and I felt so terrible, man. So they started treating me, and I got treated for maybe 8 or 9 months or something. And on paper, I was over the lymphoma, but I was sicker and sicker and sicker, So finally, I was just at a private doctor, and my wife said, you got to go up to Memorial Sloan Kettering. We live in New York City. It's a great cancer center.
Sure.
I went to that lymphoma guy. And he said, wow. He was had a little attitude. He goes, well, what are you doing here? It looks like you're cured. You're like a baby. He didn't say that, but, he was acting like, what's the problem? He said, I'm not going to treat you. I'll do another biopsy. And I was like, oh, God. I was like, 20 pounds lighter and really sick, crying, on all these drugs and tons of drugs, Percocet, prednisone, just, millions of drugs. So when we went back to talk about the biopsy, he sat down and he was very quiet, and he pushed this box of Kleenex towards my wife and me. And he said, you have a disease, but this guy's about 70. He says, I've never seen this disease called histiocytic sarcoma. And I'm going to get you right into the rare cancer sarcoma doctor there. I go, well, is this treatable? Because I don't know, maybe, he didn't know anything about it. So it didn't look good. So my wife said, She looked it up, said, whatever you do, don't look it up. Because what it said was I probably was going to die within about 6 months, 3 months, something like that. So there was no treatment. And only about 300 people had it that they knew of. Oh, there was just no treatment. So I went to that specialist guy, super nice guy named Renow Gounder, Indian man. He said, he was about 40 then. He goes, yeah, you got this disease. And I said, well, am I going to survive? He said, well, I'll fight with you. So when he said that, we went home and I just said, oh, yeah, it's going from bad to worse, But when I first went to that doctor up at Memorial Sloan Kettering, he says, hey, we're doing this trial thing where if you agree to do it, we'll do a genomic blood test on your DNA. It takes about 6 weeks. And we'll see if there's any mutations or something. I didn't quite understand it, but at that time I was so out of it. They test you for everything. I go, sure, take the blood, I don't care. So that doctor, Dr. Gounder, was waiting for that test to come in. There were no results yet. So I said, well, we're going to wait. He goes, no, I'm going to treat you. I'm going to give you a really heavy, he called it a punchy chemo. So he gave me way stronger than anything I'd ever had. Plus I was already beat up with those other 6 months of chemo. Anyway, I ended up in the hospital with sepsis and pneumonia. One night, my blood pressure went away. I just about died. And I was in the ICU, and then I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. And then there was no treatment. So we were waiting around for this, genome blood test to come through, and nothing was coming through, So we asked him, would you mind if we try this alternative stuff with like a guy was going to give me IV vitamin C and all this equipment? And he was like, yeah, do whatever you want. He figured I didn't have much time. And that didn't do anything. And then one day he calls, he says, you got to come over. I found something. So we go over, he goes, look, I found something. And your very end of this blood test results said you have this certain mutation. And I call it MEK mutation. I went into the lab because he had been a lab guy up in Boston before. Went to the lab and he said, I think I found the mutation that causes your cancer. And I think I found a drug that's already here. It's for another kind of cancer and it's not that effective that I think will work. So he said, okay, we're going to get that. He said, but the problem is, of course, since it's not for your kind of cancer, it's going to be hard for your insurance to get it and it's very expensive. Anyway, it's Sloan Kettering, so they got it. Took about a month. And I just got it. It was the smallest little orange pill you ever saw, right? I thought, this can't do shit to my cancer. Anyway, so I said, there's no way. So I took the pill. After the second night, all my symptoms went away. My fevers, my shakes, my night sweats, they went away.
That's
amazing. I called him. He freaked out. So I go back. And after 10 days, he said, let's do a PET scan CT to see what's up. And after that, he goes, you have 80% reduction of all tumors.
Wow.
I'm going to stay on this. And I said, well, what's the research? He goes, oh, no, you're the research. There's no research.
Oh, boy.
So he tried a million different ways. Take 2 milligrams every day. Now after a month, let's stop. Let's do 6 milligrams for a week. Then let's do that. He just tried a million different things because he didn't want a resistance. After a while, it was 0 cancer coming up in the test. And that went on for like a year and a half. And finally I said to him, well, how would I know if I'm cured? He goes, well, the only way you'll know is to stop taking the medicine, but that's up to you. And you could ask your wife and go home. And I go, I don't have to ask her. Let's stop now. He says, if you make it a year off the meds and it doesn't come back, you're not in remission. You're totally cured. It's not coming back. And they don't say that often. So after a year, never came back. It's been 4 years.
Wow.
In one of my appointments in the last year, I said, hey, I just go in once a year now. I said, when you met me, what did you think I had, a year or two? He said, the most you had was 3 months when I met you. So he ended up writing an article for the New England Journal of Medicine on my case because there had been no treatment for this disease. People came out of the woodwork. A drug company came and they made a drug specifically for histiocytic sarcoma. And people started knowing about it and treating it. And I asked him recently, I said, well, now that you have this, you know about it, you know about me and everything. How many people, what percentage of people can you cure it? He said 100% now.
Wow. It sounds to me in an interesting parallel that he was practicing a form of improvisational medicine on you.
He always says to me, we were doing jazz together.
You were doing jazz,
I said, what do you mean? I just did what you said. He goes, no. You know how so many patients wouldn't have done it. You took a chance. And, but he was just improvising.
Well,
he's an out of the box guy.
Well, after all, the medical profession, the doctors are just practicing. They're in practice, So, all right, we have been having this incredible chat. I've been talking to Michael Wolff for a little more than an hour. This has just been fascinating stuff. And just wondering, in all of your experiences, and you must have more than one example of something that you've been through that was either weird, strange, quirky, offbeat, or just plain funny.
Well, when I was with Cannonball Adderly in 1975, we had been on the road for about 4 weeks in the United States, I think Seattle, and I don't remember where we were before. And we went up to Montreal to play. There was a club in the old town. We're going to play there a week or two. And we got there the night before, and we got the next morning. We were going to do our sound check, in the afternoon, so maybe noon or 1. Cannonball Adderly and I and our drummer, Roy McCurdy, went down, and we had rented 2 cars. So Nat Adderly, his brother who played cornet, and Walter Booker, the bassist, were going to come in the other car. But we went down first. I had to load in all my keyboard stuff and the other the saxes and stuff. And we go to get in the car. And before we got in the car, there's these screeching of all these different cars. And these guys get out and put guns to our heads. And they're screaming at us in French. Oh, we don't know what's happening. They handcuff us. They throw us into their cars. Roy McCurdy and I are handcuffed together and put our heads down in the back seat. Cannonball's big guy, so he's in his own car. And they speed, and we don't know where they're going. We don't know who they are. They don't want to identify themselves. And we go to this police station. We go in, and they, take our handcuffs off. They strip search us. And we finally find out that somebody had robbed a bank, probably Black people, and they were arresting every Black group they could find. And I got swept up with that. So anyway, I was saying, don't we get I want to get my phone call. They said, you don't get that phone call. This is in America. I was like, oh man, I knew Cannonball and Roy were going to get off. I knew those guys. They were very distinguished and famous, but man, I looked like every hippie in 1975 in Montreal. I had long hair down to my back. I had a big beard. I figured, I look like one of those French dudes. Anyway, they put me in a jail cell and they threw in this brown paper bag. And I opened it up, and it had this horrible cardboard like bread, and in the middle of it, this slimy piece of some kind of yellow cheese. I just put it back in the bag, and I just sat there. And finally, they came and got me, and they got Roy, and then put us in the cars, and just Roy and I. We didn't see Cannonball. They didn't tell us where we're going. They didn't say a word. They drove us back to the parking lot of the hotel. We got out, and they left. So we were so happy to be back. We go up to the room our hotel's on, our room, and we see the Cannonball's room, the door is open. So we go in, and Cannonball's in there with Walter Booker, and Cannonball's sitting up on the bed, and that brown paper bag is torn beside him, and he's eating that cheese sandwich. And he goes, not bad, my man, not bad.
Well, you're in a foreign country. You don't have the same rules or laws.
No.
And you don't know what they're charging you with.
There you go. That's right. That was racism,
Unfortunately, some of that still goes on today.
Oh, yeah. I had a lot of those experiences, I didn't even know it because my idols, my peers, my employers, my best friends, we were all these African-American musicians. I was usually the only white guy in the band with them, or Nancy Wilson or Sonny Rollins, and shit happened all the time. They think I was the manager. With Sonny Rollins, we were playing in Mississippi. I had to check the band in. I wrote a lot about that in my book.
You did. You wrote very movingly about it. It's sad that it's part of our history. It is part of our history, but
part of our present.
And part of our present, which is even more disgraceful. So, all right, last question for you today, Michael. You've already given us a ton of advice throughout the show, but I'm just wondering if you have a single solid piece of advice that you like to give to people who are starting out in the business, or maybe they're in a little bit and trying to get to that next level.
I don't know that I have a good answer. I know my wife, a lot of people will say, well, my daughter, my son want to be an actor. They're in high school. What should they do? Should they get an agent? so they get pictures. And she says, no, just do the high school plays, So if they're that young, I just say, man, just find your friends and play with your friends. Do anything you can in the school. No need to jump into being a professional. But if you're trying to be a professional, I mean, look, the way I did it was you was hanging out. It was, networking in person, going out every night to hear music. Now, I mean, it's all online. I don't think I have good advice for those people. I know at NYU, my students are from 18 to 21 or 22, and then I have graduate students. Most of them are graduate, more than half now. And I just say there are two main things. Go out to hear music every chance you can and play with people that are better than you. It's like tennis. If you want to be a good tennis player, you got to play with a better tennis player, or anything that you do in life, So try to find people that are better than you. Beg, steal, or borrow. Figure out a way that they're going to let you play with them. That's my suggestion.
I think that's pretty sound advice. You came up that way yourself. You played with who you could play with. You basically trained yourself to be a business person within the business. And I think that there's nothing wrong with that as long as you stick to it.
I mean, look, I made my fair share of mistakes. My kids ask me sometimes questions, they don't know what to do. And I say, well, look, let me just tell you, any regrets I have are not anything I did. It's always stuff I didn't do. I turned down because I was too cool or whatever. So, when I was really I was a teenager getting in, I think, going to be a musician. And my father, I was complaining like, oh, I don't want to play that kind of music. I get hired for whatever, play at a fraternity at UC Berkeley, And he said, well, he grew up in the Depression. He said, my opinion is, if you're not digging ditches or breaking the law, you're all right. So that's something to remember.
Yeah, that's
100% I couldn't be too precious, So I played every kind of music. I played country web music, funk music, Latin music, rock and roll, jazz, some classical. I just love music. And I had what I liked the best, which is what I'm doing now. But, wrote scores, some stupid, some good, it's nothing wrong with working hard.
Just take the gigs as they come.
I think so. I mean, maybe that's, everybody doesn't agree. But like I said, I don't regret any gig I've done. I've always gotten something out of it. Either I learned something musically, or I met somebody, or something good happened. And turning things down hasn't worked for me. Maybe it does for other people.
No, I think what you're saying is absolutely true. The more that you do, the better it gets.
When you're young, when you're starting out.
Sure. Of course.
When you're Hanks or somebody, Tom, or somebody like that at this stage, yeah. Or me, I don't take every gig.
No, you can afford to be more selective as you.
Well, and I don't get asked to do a million gigs as a sideman, but even as a leader, I just can't do every gig.
Well, Michael Wolff, this has been an absolutely fascinating, fun, interesting hour plus on StoryBeat, and I'm so delighted that you spent some time with me today. And I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
Well, I can't thank you enough for having me. You were a great interviewer and conversationalist, and so the fact that you read the book and knew about me, and who doesn't like to talk about themselves? Awesome, man. We're going to do another one where I ask you questions. You're going to tell me all about your screenwriting career and,
that would be an interesting twist. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Now, as promised, we have a real treat for you. Please sit back and listen to Michael Wolff on piano and Alex Wolff on drums as they play Michael's composition, Left Out, with drums.
That's all I wanted to do, right? back to the F. I might use this as a bridge instead.
I love that groove so much.
Yeah, cool.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Story Beat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.